I'm Jose Ferrer, your host for Africa, Cape Town to Cairo, the fascinating documentation of an unusual adventure shared by 36 American families. What makes this particular journey so extraordinary is that these 106 people wanted more than just a superficial look at Africa. They wanted to become intimately involved with the dark continent. This is why they decided to drive from Cape Town, South Africa to Cairo. Today you'll share both their trials and their triumphs. Everything you're going to see is true, for this chronology was filmed just as it happened, day by day. They were swallowed by mud in the Congo. Blinding sandstorms in the Nubian desert whipped them without mercy. They suffered everything from broken hearts to broken axles. They planned on 3 months, and it took them 7. And they clocked over 12,000 miles. A four-wheel drive truck was their means of locomotion. A travel trailer hitched to the back was their only home for the better part of a year. These adventurers call themselves the Wally-Byam Caravanners. They are an informal group of travel enthusiasts taken from many different walks of American life. They're teachers, farmers, businessmen, some are retired. The oldest member of the party was 85 years old, Dr. Monroe. The youngest, little Susan Frosh, only 6. Now, this was their plan. From the rendezvous point in Cape Town, they would head north to Durban, then through Rhodesia and the Congo up to Ethiopia, then across the Nubian desert, up the Nile, and so to Cairo. I found their experiences tremendously interesting, and I think you will too. This, then, is their story. Early in July, 106 men, women, and children, equipped with 36 cars and trailers, left Cape Town with light hearts and high spirits on the first leg of their impossible journey. The air was warm and pleasantly spiced by soft breezes from the Indian Ocean. Their appetites were sharpened by the sea air, and they arrived at the Highgate Ostrich Farm just in time for breakfast. 1 egg fed 16 of them. That baby bird you're looking at will stand 7 feet high and weigh 300 pounds in about a year. And the ostrich would rather fight than hide his head in the sand. The exquisite iridescent plumes are taken from the younger birds, while the older ostriches turn up in fashionable shops in the form of shoes, wallets, and purses. Winding back roads revealed the penetrating eyes and the shy smiles of the African youngsters who would gather to watch, from a safe distance, the most extraordinary procession any of them had ever witnessed in their short lifetimes. In a small golden valley, the caravanners made their first contact with the natives. The Maasai people are the cattle ranchers of southeastern Africa. A very independent breed, but surprisingly outgoing with a ready smile for the passing stranger. The caravanners set up camp for a few days in a large field on the outskirts of the city of Durban. This was immediately followed by a mass invasion of Zulus. Men and women poured into the camp and danced for 6 straight days. The decorative beads these women wear across their chests convey a message to the man of their choice. If she should choose to exercise her woman's prerogative and change her mind, she needs only to rearrange the beads. This kind of dancing requires sustenance, and occasionally the dancing groups would pause for a little nourishment. These girls are taking time out for a few handfuls of the African staple, mealie mush. When the women concluded their dances, the Zulu men took over. Several days later, the caravanners arrived in the little village of Mazingili, where more tribesmen turned out to dance. Neither the dance nor the music is written. It is taught to one generation by another, and somehow the choreography remains surprisingly consistent. The first impression here was that this fellow was simply having a temper tantrum, but in reality you were watching a highly serious and strenuous dance performed only by the most hardy and masculine members of the tribe. To the outsider, the frenetic body vibrations of the highly trained shimmy dancers are an endless source of fascination. Notice the incongruous variety of headgear on these tribesmen as they pass in front of you. A few days later, the caravan entered the famed Kruger National Park, one of the animal kingdom's last remaining footholds in the war against the legions of progress. They receive few but strict instructions. You must return to the compound by 6 each day, where you are locked up for the night. You cannot get out of your car for any reason, and elephants have the right of way. As if on cue, all the animals that inhabit the African adventure stories leaped out of their pages and came to life. The elephant is hopelessly myopic, and anything over 30 yards away is nothing more than a blur. But his sensitive nose can zero in on you like radar over a mile away. The giraffe is a marvelous creature to watch. He is the tallest of the jungle animals and finds his food fresh and untouched 23 feet above the ground. Of course, he is also the furthest away from a cool drink of water. The old Africa was a haven for thousands of fascinating jungle animals. But as the new Africa emerges, civilization and the needs of modern cities are driving them all toward extinction. One week later, in the pale amber light of late afternoon, the caravan was nearing the Rhodesian border. They planned to spend several days parked beside the fabled Victoria Falls. On the way to the Great Falls, the caravan quite accidentally came upon the famous Zimbabwe ruins, sometimes called the African Acropolis, and the site of what appears to have been an ancient civilization. The Zimbabwe ruins were uncovered by an American in 1868, and archaeologists still argue as to their origin. Huge and silent, these imposing remnants of the past guard their secret from curious outsiders, although the detective work still goes on. An unknown people built this fortress of solid granite blocks without the use of mortar, and yet they have defied the ravages of the past 900 years. You are now flying 600 feet above Victoria Falls, spectacular work of nature created when the rushing waters of the Zambezi River were interrupted by a huge gash a mile wide and 400 feet deep. So vast is the sight, the eyes cannot embrace it. So great is the sound, the roar stays in your ears long after you have left. The caravan now turned toward the heart of the dark continent, the Congo. The caravanners didn't know it, but they were at this moment leaving any form of paved roads, city conveniences, or civilization as we know it far behind them. At the border, they learned there was a Bantu settlement not too far away. They decided to locate it in the hopes of replenishing some of their food supplies, which were beginning to run low. These women are preparing the main staple of their diet. It's a form of cassava and rather versatile. The outer part is so poisonous, hunters use it on their spears and arrows. If scrubbed clean, however, it is safe to grind into mealy mush. The caravanners who had the courage to try it will tell you it isn't really too bad. Jungle drums thumped out the message that strangers were approaching, and the caravan was met by delegations like this one all along the way. The villagers gathered in great numbers to get a good look at these odd strangers. The Bantus turned out to be quite friendly and hospitable people, led by an English-speaking chief who wore a black turban adorned with white seashells. The caravanners were greeted with the word jumbo, a word like aloha that means hello, goodbye, good luck, or anything else you please. To this day, Bantu children probably think this is a typical American ceremonial dance. The caravanners did some trading, left a few small gifts, and departed amid shouts of Jumbo, Jumbo. The caravan now turned toward the land of the legendary Watusi, the giant men of Africa. Occasionally, however, they would run out of road altogether. They made arrangements to cross the Luava River on a homemade barge that you simply wouldn't use unless you were desperate, and by this time they were. It took courage to put everything they owned aboard the makeshift ferry, but with no alternative open to them, they placed 36 trucks and trailers on board and said their prayers. In 2 days, everyone was safely across. It seemed to take forever, but at long last the caravanners pulled in to make camp in the land of the Watusi. Almost at once, the Watusi began to perform one ceremonial dance after the other, each more fascinating than the last. Even the Watusi children made their contribution. This old man is chasing away evil spirits. With little children, he looks pretty evil himself. Brilliantly attired in feathers and beads, this group of Watusi tribesmen perform an allegorical dance that recalls the old tribal wars of years ago when entire armies would dance in preparation for battle. Looking as menacingly as he knew how, the local witch doctor decided to drive out evil spirits. Another native, playing the part of evil, picked up his spear and set out to make the witch doctor earn his victory. One cannot help but think of the Watusi as fearless warriors, invincible lion hunters who encounter all the savage animals, and yet look what happened when one of the caravanners approached them with his little poodle. The following afternoon, the caravanners hiked to a small village on the shores of Lake Tanganyika, where it was said the witch doctor would tell you your fortune with amazing accuracy. They arrived to the plaintive moans of an ancient horn, punctuated by the rhythmic chanting of the Rundi people who were in the midst of celebration. Witchcraft is very serious business here, and the renowned witch doctor began at once to drive away any demons that may have come in with the caravanners. The caravanners told the good doctor that they were destined for Cairo. Would they make it safely by Christmas? He rolled out the bits of bone and announced, "I see trouble on the great desert. I see a camel driver. He brings you a message." A few miles outside the village, a tall warrior armed with a spear stepped into the road and stopped the entire caravan. As it turned out, he was a friendly fellow who spoke some English and, along with some sign language, gave the caravanners directions to the land of the Pygmies. The dense foliage of the Ituri forest was alive with hundreds of curious and suspicious pygmy people who peered at the strange invaders who rumbled noisily through their forest. The less timid ventured onto the road and waved their welcome. No sooner had the caravan come to a stop when they were surrounded by the little people who obviously don't get a lot of company. Apparently, none had ever seen a balloon before, and when the caravanners blew them up, the pygmies became as excited as children at a carnival. Heads up, fellows. The little people led the caravanners into their village, which consists of a ring of huts, each facing in what the occupant considers to be a lucky direction. The pygmy women are the homemakers and spend their day beautifying themselves and grooming the youngsters. Pygmy children are the same as children all over the world. Show them a tree and they want to play Tarzan. This little fellow decided it was time for his midday repast and couldn't be bothered. Pygmies have a relatively short lifespan. This old man is probably 45 or 50 years old, and that is about the limit here. Pygmy men are excellent hunters. They get their tools from the neighboring Bantu, who are under the impression they own the Pygmies, and trade their crude weapons for fresh game. The Pygmy's life is simple almost to the point of envy. What little clothing he needs is made without the aid of needle and thread. The bark from the fig tree is pounded until the pulp is as a piece of cloth. A common bush yields the red dye, and the little finger painting gives it the flair of an original. Have an infinite variety of dances for every occasion. Each is singularly expressive. The dance you are now watching is a fertility ritual, but they also have dances to improve their hunting or to eliminate a bolozi, an evil spirit that hides inside the body and is greatly feared by all Pygmies. Here is one of the most fascinating examples of African mime ever filmed. The Pygmies call it the monkey dance. The caravanners would throw out bits of candy and the ingenious mimics would retrieve them monkey fashion. Notice how even the most subtle actions of the monkey are duplicated with perfect fidelity. When it was time to leave, the Pygmies gathered around the trailers and gave the caravanners a warm farewell. With a new supply of fresh game and native fruits and vegetables purchased from the Pygmies, the caravan began its exodus from the Congo. Over mountains, then down through narrow passes, they pushed their way through the heavy brush where wildlife thrives in happy abundance. Zebras you see grazing also drew the interest of a lioness who was hungry enough to attempt a kill during daylight hours. Hidden in the deep grass, she makes a careful assessment before she moves in for the kill. When the lioness has satisfied her hunger, ravenous vultures screech their approval of the bill of fare left for them. Giant herds of wildebeests sound almost like thunder as they rumble across the plains. When provoked, the treacherous rhino attacks anything in sight, and the caravan found it a prudent policy to stop until the brute lost interest in them. The hippos, on the other hand, are a happy lot, and nothing seems to disturb their water sports. The road to Uganda was unbearably hot. Huge anthills lined the sides of the trail, sometimes reaching a height of 30 feet. All are crawling with millions of African ants that get into everything. As luck would have it, the caravan entered the Dust Bowl low on water, and in 2 days they were completely out, but managed to get by on fruit juices. They swallowed grit and dirt for 2 more miserable days until they finally reached a large stream. The caravan stopped, and 106 hot and dusty people jumped in to perform an old American water ritual. It wasn't until later that they entertained the sobering possibility of crocodiles. For 2 days, the weary travelers washed and bathed and scrubbed everything they owned. For the moment, at least, they must have been the cleanest people in the world. The hot African sun hung high over the equator to watch the caravanners begin the tortuous passage that leads to Ethiopia. Twisting and turning, they crawled through misty highlands, then down through endless green valleys that seemed to melt on the horizon. The countryside was peaceful and awesomely quiet. The only sounds were the drone of the engines and the occasional cry of wild birds. The Ethiopian government had previously warned of unfriendly nomadic tribes that terrorize this empty wasteland and wait for the unsuspecting stranger. And for the first time, the caravanners felt a little uneasy. They kept their eyes open and stayed close together. Their distrust was suddenly awakened by a band of armed men. To their relief and surprise, it was a special escort sent by Emperor Haile Selassie. This is Mussolini Bridge in Ethiopia, built during World War II, then abandoned. The caravanners were convinced it would never support the load. The warped logs buckled and complained, but the caravan rattled across without incident. On the other side of Mussolini Bridge, they faced a new problem. No road. The caravan leader summoned for manpower, woman power, child power, any kind of power. Altogether, they began to pull out rocks, fill up the deep holes, and chop back the invading jungle. It was an impossible task, but they labored in blessed ignorance, as no one knew it was going to be like this for the next 700 miles. The caravanners quickly learned that 16 men, 10 women, and 9 children on the end of a 1-inch nylon line could often accomplish what a power winch could not. Every few bumpy yards, 4 flat tires at a time would cause somebody's rig to collapse like a stricken animal. Then things got worse. Springs ruptured, axles snapped like matchsticks, hitches and bumpers parted under the strain. Volunteer crews set up a makeshift repair station and accomplished some ingenious repairs with welding torch, contact cement, and unbelievable metal splints. It was true they were looking for adventure, but none had bargained for this much, and the caravan would certainly have ended right here had it been possible to take a plane out and leave everything to the jungle. On a bad day, the caravan made no progress at all. On a good day, they made as much as 6 miles, and it was cause for jubilation. Young and old worked like this all day and fell exhausted into their beds each night, then started early again the next morning. By the 3rd week, it was an effort to be cheerful. Their bones creaked and their muscles ached. There wasn't a caravaner, man or woman or child, who didn't have a sore back. They battled the jungle for 5 long weeks and swore if they ever saw another paved road in their lives again, they would kneel down and kiss it. And did it ever look good? It was the best road they had seen in many weeks, and to them it looked like the Jersey Turnpike. With their spirits renewed, they sang triumphantly all the way to the capital city of Addis Ababa. Addis Ababa is a living tapestry interwoven with the threads of many cultures and customs. As you near the city, you can hear the sing-song of the street vendors. You can inhale 1,000 fragrances that float down from the busy marketplace. You see a parade of interesting dark faces whose classic features reveal their African, Hamitic, and Semitic origins. You catch a glimpse of business suits, white robes, and policemen in Bermuda shorts. The caravanners had hardly settled down when a royal messenger arrived with word that the emperor himself was on his way to welcome the caravan officially. Donald Bliss, the American ambassador, ran over and gave them all some quick lessons in protocol, and later that same afternoon, they were receiving the Lion of Judah, elect of God, His Royal Majesty, the Emperor of Ethiopia. The conquering lion entered the camp with quiet and unpretentious dignity, then addressed the group in English as he officially welcomed them into his domain. The escort had kept him apprised of the caravan's progress, and he was understandably impressed with their accomplishment. He became vitally interested in the group of American adventurers, and when the formalities were over, he insisted on visiting with each caravaner individually. The emperor keeps a number of pet lions. This one is the sovereign's favorite and constant companion. Haile Selassie is a strong and powerful ruler, but the caravanners found him to be a kind and soft-spoken gentleman who talked about his grandchildren like any other proud grandfather. For the caravanners, this was a memorable experience. Before taking his leave, the emperor invited them all to tea at his palace. The next afternoon, the caravanners followed the proverbial red carpet into a palace resplendent with marble columns. Among the guests were dignitaries from a dozen countries, including representatives from the American embassy. The caravanners felt like the lords and ladies of storybook fame. They expressed their thanks and said goodbye to their newfound friend, the conquering Lion of Judah. 3 weeks to the day, the caravan left Addis Ababa for the ancient city of Eritrea, passing scores of nomads who have no particular home, but like the shifting sands of the desert they live in, they drift from place to place. The city of Eritrea is separated from the outside world by Mussolini Pass, the most impossible mountain pass anyone here had ever experienced. They climbed almost straight up and descended almost straight down, getting their courage from watching the fellow ahead of them. Arriving in the old city of Eritrea, the caravanners were surprised to learn the local chief already knew of them, and he offered to show the city's famous collection of crown jewels. These emblems of power, dating back to the Queen of Sheba, are hewn of pure gold, encrusted with brilliant rubies, priceless emeralds, and a fortune in diamonds. In Eritrea, the caravan made rendezvous with the American military police, who volunteered to see the caravan safely as far as the Sudanese border. Just one more country to cross, and they would all be in Egypt. Then, on to Cairo. In a small oasis, they met up with another caravan of about 50 or 60 camels. Camel caravans serve as the railroad here, and while they waited their turn at the water hole, the caravanners watched the four-legged freight cars take on a 10-day supply of water with pardonable envy. Camel caravans have been following the same route for over 2,000 years. It was a caravan like this one that brought the treasures of conquest to the Queen of Sheba. This fellow is the desert mailman and carries messages in these small containers. Suddenly the caravanners wondered if this was the camel driver the witch doctor back in Tanganyika said would bring them a message. It obviously was not, and they all had a good laugh at the witch doctor's expense. They spent several hours resting and bartering for a few souvenirs and took advantage of some first-hand road information. A brief friendship on the desert, and the two caravans parted. Each to his own destiny must go. One to the next oasis, to no place and back. And the other, on to Cairo and the Great Pyramids of Giza. At this point, the caravanners left their military police escort and headed 36 abreast across the Sudan. They knew now they would never make it to Cairo by Christmas. All had been through a great deal in the past 6 months, and they figured the worst was now behind them. But they were so wrong. The dreaded Nubian desert was waiting in ambush just around the bend. Almost at once, the feared desert exploded in their faces with all its fury. They were hit by stinging sands and burning winds. In a matter of minutes, they were totally consumed by dense clouds of choking dust. It wasn't long before the entire caravan was floundering in a sea of fathomless sands. They felt helpless and hopeless. The burning gales scorched their faces. Every breath was like swallowing fire and brought pain to their lungs. The men sweated and swore. the women worked and wept. The Nubian desert is a blistering inferno of vagrant sand dunes exiled from the rest of the world. No roads, no communications, just a trackless wasteland and homeless winds that turned on them without mercy. They tried anything to keep moving, but whatever they attempted, the vindictive desert would fight back with every perversity it could summon. Now the ill-omened caravanners could not help but recall the prophecy of the medicine man back in Tanganyika. "I see trouble on the great desert," he had said, and indeed they could see it too. They wanted to quit, and yet they knew they didn't dare. They pulled until they thought their arms would fall off. They pushed with every aching muscle. Like a wicked soul without a body, the enraged Nubians seemed determined to prove its strength, and as fast as they could get one trailer out, another would sink in. Progress was painfully slow, and it was risky. No one would admit it, but all had doubts they would ever get out. The raging desert confirmed their conjecture. Desert legends say that the sun is a spark from hell. It escapes in the morning and returns there at night to sleep and gather strength for the next day. And at the moment, 106 Americans firmly believed it. They battled the great desert for 10 endless days and 10 empty nights in what seemed to them an eternal nightmare. By now, they were sick with despair. Their determination was their only asset. 21 children was their liability. They fought for every mile, and on the 11th day, the sight of telegraph poles told them civilization was near. Their spirits lifted, and regaining their morale, they found the strength to sing as they rolled on toward Egypt. The camel caravan they had met on the desert arrived in Egypt many days before, and word of the lost caravan spread from village to village. Great crowds gathered to watch and cheer the strangest-looking caravan they had ever seen come out of their desert. Caravanners rolled into Egypt jubilant, triumphant, and dead tired. After a few days of much-needed rest, they put their rigs on barges once more, this time to cross the Nile. This splendid example of marlinspike seamanship only mildly alarmed the caravanners, who could only hope that the ferry was in better condition than the mooring lines. Not exactly shipshape and Bristol fashion, but a far cry from the primitive floats they used in the Congo, and so the caravanners put their rigs on board without the slightest apprehension. Some of them crossed on the barges. Those with a more adventurous heart accepted a ride on one of the native dhows. This caravanner also had an adventurous stomach and joined the Egyptian sailors in a bite of lunch. the colossi of King Ramses at Abu Simbel. Huge and magnificent, the great temple is carved from the side of a mountain. The stone figures you see are as tall as an office building. Men of many nations contributed to the monumental task of moving these priceless relics to the top of the mountain in an effort to save them from the waters of the new Aswan Dam. On this side of the Nile, remnants of ancient Egypt are everywhere. The Egyptians left the world a legacy of art that retells the magnificence of its culture, the genius of its thought, and the power of its empire. Exquisite examples of Egyptian splendor are these remnants of a temple erected by Queen Hatshepsut to honor herself and Amun, king of gods, at El Karnak. The hieroglyphs proclaim her son of God, and her nephew, King Thutmose III, ordered the obelisks covered by a wall. In time, the walls crumbled, and the Queen's temple saw the light of the sun once more. Carved from the solid rock, the colossi of Amenhotep III look silently out across the Nile with imperishable eyes, as they have since 1398 BC. The silent Sphinx appears to guard all that remains of the powerful king's colossal temple. It was now early February, and the caravanners had been on the road for more than 7 months. In sight of the great pyramids of Giza, they knew their long dream was at last fulfilled. The witch doctor was right. They never made it by Christmas, but still there was a feeling of accomplishment. It was strange. They could hardly wait to get here, and now they were sorry their impossible journey was almost over. Together, they shared the trials and the triumphs, the good times, the bad ones. They also made some lasting friendships. Everybody learned a great deal from his experience. The older people think of themselves as anything but senior citizens. The small children seem more aware of the world around them. The teenagers discovered a new side of their parents and gained new admiration for them. And so it was that 106 men, women, and children left their tears and their sweat on the parched sands of the Sudan, their laughter ringing in the Congo, and their tire marks for others to follow, from Cape Town to Cairo. I hope you enjoyed our African adventure. This is Jose Ferrer wishing you a pleasant journey wherever you might wander, and may all your travel dreams come true.